Welcome to a brand new gaming PC build episode on the channel. Now this PC might just be the best badass $650 gaming computer that you can build right now. And the best of all, it is a PC that has the potential to deliver smooth frame rate for years. Let's jump right into the video. Alright, so let's go ahead and start with the processor, the 12100F, which is a 4-core 8-thread CPU, which I was able to pick up for just $99. Now, you might be wondering, are 4-core CPUs even worth it in 2022? Well, after playing Apex, Halo, Warzone, and Spider-Man, I can happily say that it can handle the most popular games pretty damn well. And compared to a 6-core part, there is only about 10 to 15% difference in Apex Legends. And with this setup, you have the convenient option to upgrade without having to pick up a brand new motherboard. Now, speaking of the motherboard, this is the ASUS TUF B660M. Now basically I grabbed this board because it is widely available, so you can easily replicate my build if you like, but it also packs a lot of nice features such as Aura Sync, massive heatsink, plenty of I/O, good VRMs, etc, etc. But you can easily get away cheaper by picking up this board from Gigabyte and still get the same gaming experience. For RAM, we're gonna go with these from Corsair called Vengeance RGB RS, 2x8GB, clock speed of 3200 MHz, which I did pay $88 for. Now RGB does add a bit to the price, and RGB isn't necessary for this build, but it definitely adds a bit to the aesthetic. Anyway guys, if you do want to get away as cheaply as possible, I'll link up a similar kit for about $45. Lastly, we have the graphics card, and here I'm going loco, spending most of our budget, because as most of you guys probably know, the graphics card does the heavy lift. Now for this build, I'm picking up the best price to performance GPU available, the Radeon RX 6600. This particular model comes from XFX, and it's a really nice card if you ask me. We got 8 gigs of RAM, which is enough for most games in both 1080p and 1440p. And as we can see, 1080p runs like a dream, but 1440p also runs above 60 FPS on average in most games as well. And I paid $249 for this bad boy. Anyway, let's jump right into the building process. So you want to place the motherboard on the motherboard box. You want to make sure to install the CPU the right way. So locate the triangle on the CPU, which we then match up with the triangle found on the motherboard. Open the lever, then carefully place the CPU in its socket, then lower the lever and remove the plastic cover. Moving on to the RAM installation, pretty simple process. We want to install both sticks into these light gray slots with the Corsair logo facing away from the processor. A little bit of force is needed to lock the retention tabs. Now, before we go ahead and install the storage, let's first go ahead and install the processor cooler, which is coming included with the CPU. Now, normally guys, I would avoid this cooler, but for this build, where the CPU isn't that powerful, you'll be more than fine with this particular heatsink. And yep, the best part is, it doesn't add anything to our budget. So we want to place the cooler over the CPU, and then align the push pins with the holes around the processor socket. Push the pins until you hear a click, and this is what it should look like where the pin has been locked in place. Let's go ahead and install the SSD, the Kingston NV1 500GB NVMe drive. Now before you freak out over the size, Kingston does sell a 1TB and a 2TB unit as well. Anyway, I picked this up for about $40, which is a steal if you ask me. Now you're gonna need a small Phillips screwdriver to remove the heat shield, and then we can just slide the unit into place in a sort of a 45-degree angle. Remember to remove the sticker and then reinstall the shield again. Let's go ahead and take a look at the case, the Fractal Design Meshify C. Now, I was able to snag this for a little bit less than $100, which I do think is a pretty good deal with all things considered. Now, Fractal includes 2 fans, which is more than enough for this setup that we are building today. Cooling is gonna be great in this case, especially because of this massive mesh front, allowing cold air to enter the case. Let's move on to the power supply, and for today's build I picked up the TX 750W unit from Corsair. Now 750W is definitely way above the specs needed for this kind of build, but because there is a brand new CPU and GPU generation right around the corner, I'm planning to add a more powerful CPU and even a next-gen GPU later down the road. But you can easily grab a 750 unit from, let's say, VGA for just about $55. Remove the PSU frame, then slide the unit into place with the fan facing downwards and secure it using these 4 screws that comes with the case. Next up we have this cable extension kit from Fantex, which I paid about $35 for. This step, guys, is optional, but it's totally worth it, and it's going to give the build a more pleasing aesthetic look. Basically all we need to do is we want to attach each of these cables to each cable end of the power supply, starting with the 24-pin power connector for the motherboard, the 8-pin for the CPU, as well as the PCIe cable for the graphics card. Now flipping over to the back of the case, we find a box holding all the accessories. The first thing we're gonna need is this bag that holds the standoff that we're gonna need to install the motherboard. So install each of these at the location you see on screen now. Now we can go ahead and install the motherboard using the screws that comes included in the accessory box at the following places. And after all of that, we can finally go ahead and deal with all the cables, and to make things a little bit easier, we're gonna deal with the PSU cables first. And first up we have the 24-pin power cable, which we route through this hole right here and connect it to the connector found at the right middle side of the board. Next up we have the 8-pin power, which we pass through this hole right here and plug it into the connector found on the upper left side corner. Now let's go ahead and deal with the last set of cables for the case. First up we have this, the USB 3, routed through the same cutout as the 24-pin power cable and install it to the connector found right next to the motherboard cable. Let's move on to the audio cable. This one goes right here. And lastly, we have the connector for the front panel, which goes through these pins found at the lower right side corner. Now we can plug in the graphics card and attach the PCIe cable. And the build is completed. But wait, there is more, guys. To spice up the aesthetic a bit, I ended up installing these 4 140 fans from Corsair with white LEDs that is making the build look so much cooler. And with everything said and done, here's what the build finally looks like. Let's take a look at the gaming performance. Now if you're wondering what the 12100F and the 6600 combo is capable of, here's the benchmark you guys been waiting for. Overall, I'm quite surprised how well the 4-core part actually holds up. Starting with Halo Infinite at 1080p high settings results in about 94 FPS, while 1440p high settings results in 63 FPS or frames per second. Call of Duty Warzone average about 115 FPS at 1080p and 77 FPS at 1440p. Spider-Man also runs smooth with an average of 125 FPS at 1080p and 100 FPS at 1440p. Apex with unlocked framerate hovers around 130 FPS at 1080p and 112 FPS at 1440. Looking at the rest of the games tested, we are seeing strong and healthy numbers across the board. Anyway guys, you find all PC parts listed down below. If you're new to the channel, make sure to subscribe, like the video, and of course, you definitely do want to join the Discord server to don't miss out on future content and upcoming giveaways on the channel. Now watch either of these two videos and I will see you guys in the next video.